Everyone's joining in. Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar on navigating Canada's freight challenges, insights from the trucking sector. My name is Jigar Kanjani, and I'm the Professional Development Program Coordinator at Supply Chain Canada West. I'm here to kick things off before handing the session over to our speakers and moderator. While folks are still joining in, we have got a quick sneak peek at one of the most anticipated events coming up this summer. Let's take a quick look.
Experience golf like never before at the Procurement Professional Open, Supply Chain Canada's premier golf tournament in the heart of the Canadian Rockies. Join us on June 11th, 2025, at the stunning Silvertip Resort in Canmore, Alberta. Nestled in the Bow Valley, this 600-acre mountain course offers breathtaking views and an unforgettable golfing experience. As the official kickoff event for the Supply Chain Canada National Conference, this tournament offers the perfect opportunity to network with peers, clients, and industry decision makers in a relaxed setting. Enjoy our Texas Scramble format on course mini games and exciting prizes. Your registration includes cart rental, green fees, transportation from downtown Calgary, breakfast, and more. Starting bright and early at 6:30 a.m. with transportation from the Hyatt downtown, enjoy a full day of golf followed by an invitation to the exclusive Fellowship Award reception at the Ampersand on June 12th, 6:30 p.m. Spaces are limited for this exclusive event. Register now.
All right, looks incredible, right? That's the Procurement Professional Open happening this June at Silvertip in Canmore. It's not just a golf tournament, it's a full day to unwind, network with industry professionals, and kick off the national conference on a high note. If you'll be in Calgary, don't miss out. We would love to see you there. All right, now moving on. I see a good number of folks have joined us already. For those of you who have just tuned in, welcome to the webinar on navigating Canada's freight challenges, insights from the trucking sector. We are glad to have you with us today. Before we dive into today's discussion, just a few quick housekeeping notes to help you make the most of the session. This session is being recorded. You'll receive both recording and slides after the webinar, so no need to take notes unless you have to. SCMP holders in Alberta will have CPD credits added automatically. For SCMPs outside of Alberta, please log in manually in your member portal and log in your credits. Everyone is currently in listen-only mode, but you are absolutely encouraged to participate. Use the Q&A box anytime for your questions. And of course, the chat box is open throughout. Drop in comments, reactions, and questions as we go. Now on to why we are here today. Today's topic is incredibly relevant. Canada's freight landscape is in flux. From driver shortages and fuel price volatility to regulatory pressure and supply chain delays. Yet, freight still powers our economy. This webinar will unpack how supply chain professionals can better collaborate with carriers and logistics providers to reduce the disruption, manage costs, and drive long-term stability. To facilitate that, we have got a fantastic panel joining us today, each bringing deep expertise and on-the-ground perspectives. Firstly, we have Rob Eskins, who is the Vice President of Sales, Western Canada at Manitoulin Transport. Rob has been with Manitoulin for over 24 years, leading strategic sales and driving transportation solutions nationwide. He's also a certified sales leader and an active contributor to Supply Chain Canada, known for his sharp insights and collaborative approach. We also have with us Robert Harper, who is the president of the Alberta Motor Transport Association, also known as AMTA, with over 30 years of leadership experience, including roles at Dexterra, ATCO, and the Government of Alberta. Robert brings a 360-degree view of Alberta's transportation ecosystem. His work spans finance, operations, and policy, and he's a well-respected voice on what's next for the sector. And guiding today's discussion and conversation is Alan To, President and CEO of Supply Chain Canada West, who will be moderating today's discussion and the Q&A session. Thank you to the amazing panel for being with us today. Without further ado, Robert Harper, the stage is yours. Robert, you're on mute.
Thank you, Jigger. Thank you very much for allowing the Alberta Motor Transport Association to give you an overview of the industry's state of transportation. Quickly jump into it. So here's what we're going to talk about. We're going to talk about those issues that are, we think, most concerning in the industry perspective that you would like to learn about. First, we'll give an industry overview. Then we're going to talk about Driver Inc., which many of you may already know, but if you don't, this will give you a good idea of the issue. Driver shortages, the long-term economic trends that we're seeing within the industry, and the technological change. And then there'll be a Q&A. So first of all, let's talk about the transportation industry overall. It is a dominant mode of freight transportation in Canada. About 90% of all consumer goods and foodstuffs move via truck. Almost 2/3 of the value of goods between Canada and the United States move by truck. Nearly 1% of the Canadian population and over 1.5% of the labor workforce are driving trucks as an occupation. Nationally, trucking as an industry is estimated to contribute about 4.2% or $40 billion to GDP. There's 400,000 people employed in the trucking industry, and over 300,000 of those are drivers. 24 billion of income for Canadians, $4.2 billion of personal taxes. It equates to 4.2 billion of personal taxes and 4.1 billion of indirect taxes. And keep in mind, when we're talking that 90% of goods are delivered, the first and last mile delivery, even when it's rail and marine, is most usually that's the pickup point or delivery point, is usually done by truck to the consumer. Now I want to talk about Drivers Inc. This is what we were in the industry is the intentional or fraudulent misclassification of drivers as independent contractors. This has been enabled this has been growing in the last number of years, but certainly as heightened by human trafficking that's come from the temporary foreign worker program, which you may have seen has been equated by the United Nations to a form of modern slavery. It's been enabled by CRA non-enforcing tax compliance, and it's also enabled by government policies that have raised the cost of employment and diverged it from what appears to be self-employed. And when I'm talking about, it's certainly vacation pay sick pay, days off as you're an employer that you have to grant employees, which a contractor doesn't get paid. It's enabled by shippers who do not question why some companies can undercut their reputable transport counterparts by 20 to 30% on a consistent basis. The impacts are forcing ethical companies out of business, and it's forcing ethical companies to suppress those wages for drivers. Unethical companies cut corners on safety and how they treat drivers, which is certainly a concern of the AMTA as a safety-focused organization. And part of the major component of Driving Drivers Inc. is GST and HST fraud. Maybe a little bit later we'll talk about things that supply chain professionals can look at in terms of looking for red flags. We do have.
As a group, we have been discussing the issue very, very much out there. And one of the things that have come up multiple times, is foreign labor and also domestic labor. And these are all media reports taken it from. Threatened with physical violence, visa holders threatened with deportations, extortion, forced to break road safety rules. We're getting that into a bit. Unsafe vehicles, we'll get into that a bit. This is all documented. So this isn't just a slide, it's all documented. Immigration fraud and forced payments, modern slavery practices. We use Truck News and CBC and Truck News. There's the Toronto Star. It's been covered multiple times. And I'm going to sound like a broken record. You have to check if this is in your supply chain. And I guarantee it's in all of your supply chain.
So that was Steve Laskowski, who is the president of the Canadian Trucking Alliance, which is AMTA is one of the members of the Canadian Trucking Alliance. And him talking last year at your conference at Supply Chain Canada on the issue of Drivers Inc. So this is, again, just impressing how critical this is to the industry in terms of an issue that we're seeing that is critical, having a lot of impact upon the industry. Then we can talk about driver shortages. Driver shortages being, we certainly saw it coming into the pandemic and out of the pandemic was, we're seeing demographics and an aging workforce that is seeing that we're going to have large shortages in the coming years in drivers. That's part of what the temporary foreign worker program was intended to address on a short-term basis. The attraction and attention will continue to challenge, and if downward wage pressures continue. And again, that's partly being generated from the illegal segment of the industry. And our view is, as an industry, is that it's somewhat being supported by shippers who don't raise the question about why some companies are able to provide huge discounts versus other, when we have a very broad-based industry with lots of participants. Attraction of younger operators is challenging. The cost and time to become a driver is costly. Alberta government's recently brought in some changes with tech to address these issues with a new pathways program. And the Alberta government, the advanced education, is trying to create a designated trade to attract and reward drivers as professionals. Long-term economic trends we're seeing is mergers and consolidations. Larger fleets are acquiring medium-sized carriers. The economies of scale, training and maintenance services are driving that merger, and the shift from owner-run, that earlier generation, to more professionally managed businesses that are no longer owner-run. There's the regulatory pressures. We're certainly seeing that in stricter rules. Environmental, zero-emission vehicles are being pushed, and whether it's on staffing, OHS, or reporting, we see those regulations. Rising fuel costs are certainly putting pressures on the industry, and supply chain disruptions, certainly trade and tariff volatility. Everyone's aware of that with Canadian. That's certainly causing uncertainty, and it's making that investment and ability to recover your investment uncertain. And then there's issues around e-commerce, the growth in e-commerce and what that's looking like is focusing on that shorter last mile and the shift from what may be long haul to short haul transportation, especially in the e-commerce world. Also in interprovincial trade and infrastructure, we're trying to get regulatory alignment, but right now that's certainly not there. But they're trying to look at mutual recognition and harmonization to get that. Certainly the current weights, lengths of vehicles and the goods pulled between provinces makes planning very difficult, and maximizing loads. There's certainly benefits that could be had for the Canadian economy if we can get harmonization. Some issues are in terms of harmonization or regulatory, but some are infrastructure. Certainly, the level of our highways and bridges are not consistent across provinces to be able to pull heavier and more consistent weights that would reduce those. And then we have the issue of U.S. litigation. There has been some very enormous verdicts coming out of the U.S., and that continues to concern operators, that rising cost of operating cross-border and the risks of operating the supply chain across the border. Technological changes that we're seeing, the government policy has been to move from zero-emission vehicles to electric vehicles. There's two ways to do that: battery electric vehicles or hydrogen fuel cell electric vehicles. The policy goal is to rapidly adopt the zero-emission vehicles and to try to convert the industry to those new technologies that save CO2 gas emissions. The reality is this goal can only be achieved, certainly in the short term, with the investment of tens of billions of dollars to change these assets in the transportation industry. And it may require investments in other parts of the supply chain because these vehicles are not like for like. Right now the alternatives are 3 to 5 times the cost of the similar asset, and they work reasonably well, but the costs are enormously different. And while the costs are normally different and they function, I won't say they are like for like. A traditional vehicle may not be replaced with one new vehicle. It may take 2 or more. These vehicles are heavier, which means they can't haul as much goods, and their distance they can travel is not either as similar or the same, or the amount of time on the road during a day in the case of electric vehicles doesn't match. So you're having to move the same amount of good with more assets. Certainly this year we're already seeing an impact in the industry is that we've certainly some heavier duty vehicles, especially in the energy sector, has not been able to get some new vehicles because they can only be sold in Canada if we can find lower emitting vehicles to offset those higher ones. And that's just the tip of the iceberg this year on that issue. Then we also have technological changes, the other technological changes we're seeing, and that would be autonomous and self-driving vehicles. They're still emerging, but they are rapidly. There are tests going on of fully automated vehicles going on in the US, and we're actually looking to do some testing in Alberta of those same technologies. There's some examples here of companies that are doing it for long haul routes. There's a potential for lower labor costs and increase, because in increasing safety and reducing fatigue because of those labor reduces the issues on labor. The barriers are, of course, urban travel is more complex than long haul. There is regulation and public acceptance. When you see a truck coming down the road that weighs, several 1,000 pounds, looking up and seeing that there's no driver in the driver's seat will cause the public some concern. And the last one is that what's the impact on driver shortages? youth going, look, I want to go into an industry that gives me a career for the remainder of my life. I'm looking at this and going, this technology change, I'm not going to have a drive in a number of years. So we have to be able to assuage that concern. Then we talk about supply chain automation, robotics, AGV streamlining of warehouses and the operations. It can improve the loading and unloading speed and reduces truck waiting times. These all will have significant impacts on supply chain in a positive way for providers. Now, I'd like to pass it off to, I've given the industry overview from the Alberta Motor Transport Association. I'd like to pass it to Rob Eskins to give a perspectives from a carrier. He's again, to reflect, he's with Manitoulin Transport. Thanks, Rob.
Yeah, thanks, Robert. I appreciate the handoff. Good afternoon, everyone. I'd like to begin by offering my thanks to Supply Chain Canada for putting the spotlight on trucking and our industry and the challenges we're facing, and especially appreciative of those members joining us today. We do realize you're wearing many hats in your day-to-day work life, with trucking just being one component, but we'll take every opportunity you give us to keep you informed about our industry. And I think it is significant that you've included the voice of the Alberta Motor Transportation Association in our discussion today, because for us in the industry and for Supply Chain Canada, they are and they will be important contributor as to our logistics community here in Western Canada as we navigate through these next couple of what I might call chaotic business cycles. But just to put a bit of a finer point on some of Robert's presentation from a carrier perspective, the first topic I'd like to speak to is cybersecurity. There have been recent incidents in our industry. They don't make the headlines, but I think the logistics community should know that our industry is spending millions to protect not only ourselves and our businesses, but also our customers. I think our customers and our business partners need to be confident that we're protecting their assets, in particular their data. In our case, in particular, we recently received our ISO 27001 certification, which basically is an international standard for managing information security. And today, with our industry as well as our own company, we focus on consistently raising the awareness of information security with our employees to the point of annoyance, the test, the cybersecurity test, but also to give our customers confidence. We just need to embed the understanding throughout our organization and our industry partners. A little bit of a clarification when I hear the term first mile or last mile delivery. When you think of the geography of Canada, it's important to make the distinction, especially for trucking in Canada, considering our geography, that a carrier like ourselves, for example, which services small town Canada, wherever there's oil and gas and mining, wherever there's resource development, the final mile or last mile could mean a shipment movement from Edmonton to Hay River, or from Edmonton to Whitehorse, Thunder Bay to Pickle Lake. These are quite long distances. But we see this coverage in final mile, especially when it comes to the government's initiatives about turning Canada into the energy superpower. Trucking will be the engine of accessing all those points where mining or resource development would take place. But just to clarify, that first mile and last mile could mean many hundreds and sometimes 1,000 miles. The other notable challenge that we're facing in LTL and truckload trucking in Canada is the the congestion, particularly in our major cities. And so sometimes when you're experiencing unpredictable or not meeting our posted delivery times, it's usually because a truck is stuck in traffic. But with our data analysis in the onboard computer systems, we can actually now measure and see that the congestion in the big cities is causing quite a bit lower productivity per truck. It's a higher fuel use and emissions from idling in those situations where we're in traffic. And lastly, we run out of hours of service for our drivers. So it's a very real and significant challenge we're facing in trucking here in Canada. On the topic of Driver Inc., just a couple of points of clarification is most trucking companies use a costing model to produce rates that we give to customers. And we know from our side that the margin needs to be in the 7 to 8% range, because from an operating ratio point of view, we know that any carrier that is above 93.5% operating ratio, which means they're making just about 6 cents on the dollar, they're not reinvesting in the company. So in trucking, it's a blood sport industry. It's very competitive, and usually our margins are in that 8% range. So when a carrier comes along, is able to provide a customer rates that are 30% or more less than ours, that would be actually below our cost. And considering all the inputs in trucking, such as the equipment and the occupancy, the hours of service, these elements, they're all the same for all of us in trucking. So this 30% difference is likely found in how they manage their driver labor. And so that's usually one of the signs where there might be an element of Driver Inc. at play. But we do look to the AMTA and the Canadian Trucking Alliance and the other Canadian trucking associations across the country, because they're working with Canada Revenue to crack down on the Driver Inc. business model. And customers and shippers do have risks in this model, because there could be legal or operational risks associated with it, and especially as CRA continues their crackdown. But just to be clear, our issue is not with drivers per se, because our business relies on the men and women who drive our trucks. I mean, they're the ones who are tarping down a flat deck of say mining equipment at a mine site at 4 a.m. in minus 25-degree weather, as we want them to be paid well, and we want to provide them with the best possible safety training and ultimately to be protected by really strong labor legislation. So this is a collective, the village type effort. We are asking the entire logistics community to join us in ensuring that this Driver Inc. business practice and the bad actors associated with it are taken out of the marketplace. So those are my comments. Robert, thanks for the intro, and thanks for a bit of time to talk about the carrier perspective.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Rob, for sharing those insights. I'm sure we all can agree on this, that making logistic partners and creating that engagement with our freight partners is not just a logistical decision, it's more of a strategical one. And with that, we would like to open up the Q&A session for our webinar, where we would be answering a few most asked questions. We have started to receive a lot of questions already, but we would like everyone to share any questions that they want the panel to answer, and I'm sure we would be able to cover most of it. Starting with a few questions that I'm sure every one of us is having, which is around the comments on the trends towards digital freight marketplace platforms. I'll direct this question to Robert first, and then to Rob. Robert, would you like to comment on the digital market, freight marketplace platforms?
Sure. Very quickly, they provide a lot of benefit for shippers, in terms of, trying to identify those cost savings. It does create some perhaps longer term issues with the freight providers being able to effectively manage their assets and their fleets. So and the question is whether those providers end up taking a lot of the benefits from who manage the service platforms that don't make its way to the freight. So in the long term, it's not clear yet, I think, whether that'll actually benefit industry. It may benefit the supplier, it may benefit the technology provider. It may not actually benefit the transportation industry.
Yeah, that's a really great insight. Rob, would you like to add onto it?
Sure. At the carrier level, there's basically two types of digital freight platforms that are coming at us. One is what we refer to as the transportation management systems. In the case of transportation management systems, you might have heard of Uber or Convoy or Flexport. There are many, and there are significant upsides for shippers and some upsides for carriers. For shippers, they're accessing rates quicker and oftentimes better rates. There's faster booking for shipments, and there's this transparency. They get to see reporting. For carriers, it can result in access to more shipments, and this data in transfer helps us plan our routes a lot better. And sometimes it results in improved payment processing. So for supply chains overall, there's they reduce inefficiencies, and so they work very well from that point of view. The second type of platform that comes at carriers is the contractor and supplier management platforms, and some of the bigger names in that sector is IS Networld or Avetta, Ariba, and again there are many, and there are upsides again. There's compliance for your vendors when it comes to safety, insurance, environmental or regulatory compliance. There's this pre-qualification of carriers or vendors based on performance or other custom-made criteria by shippers, and it can be monitored. But the comment from myself or from the carrier perspective is both of them, and I think Robert was going there, require pretty significant carrier resources, and sometimes we're actually paying for the subscription. There's a longer term commitment to maintain them, and so it's significant cost, and really the trade or the business agreement that we're often looking for is we think they're great programs, but we need the first step that a shipper to take is like an evident or a commitment to do business for the long term, that there's a bit of long-term stability relative to that investment we made in working with two of the programs.
Definitely, Rob. Yeah, that partnership aspect of it that you touched upon is really great. It needs to be more strategic than transactional, and especially the cost factor to it is significant. So considering that, it becomes all in more important to develop those partnerships and build on to it. Thanks for the panel's insight on it. We have a couple more questions that are frequently asked around this space, and then we'll also take a few more questions from the attendees here. So the other question that we have is, we would like to get the panel's guidance on the direction of carrier rates in near to medium term market. Would you have any market intelligence on it, where the rates are going and what to expect?
I'll start out from I think the industry, and then Rob can give sort of probably from a carrier. It's like anything in the future. If we all knew the future, we'd be retired already. It depends. If we don't see, and again, from a shipper's point of view, if we don't see some curtailment in the Drivers Inc., we certainly are. That's a downward pressure on rates, and certainly not an upward pressure. And if we can get if the industry can get a hold of that, it's liable to increase rates. But at the same time is what's the technological impacts on some of those cost savings that would take effect. They may not be short term, but they could be sort of medium term to longer term, that those impacts on the rates. What's happening with fuel costs, trade and the uncertainty in the US economy, that's certainly going to have an impact. Just so everyone's aware, there have been serious job losses, and there's been a number of carriers, certainly within the Calgary, Alberta, in the last number of months have gone bankrupt. So that's the type of things we're seeing that's impacting the industry, whether it's the economy or some of the non-compliant carriers, which are driving some of the compliant carriers out of business. So I say I can give you an indication of what some of those downward and upward pressures are on the industry, but I can't tell you which way necessarily is going to go.
Maybe, Robert, that's a point where I might be able to jump in and give you my read of the tea leaves on this. A couple things is one is the competitiveness of the trucking landscape is such that sometimes there's a lack of pricing discipline. But I'll speak first of all about the less than truckload or the LTL sector. Is that part of the industry requires a very significant investment in what we'll call pre-position resources, whether in our case there's 88 trucking terminals across the country, and the occupancy costs, the equipment, the overheads, none of them are actually shrinking. In fact, often in trucking, it's outpacing what you might commonly read as CPI or inflation. But we recognize our customers are facing uncertainty, and they have to focus on cost reduction or containment. And so we have to keep our increases or rises in rates as low as possible. But what we see in the coming quarters, and again, as I started out, it's a bit chaotic, but we see LTL rates, less than truckload rates across the industry, probably rising in the 4 to 7% range. But in the truckload sector is a little different market. It's a bit more commoditized. And of course, in late 2023 and 2024, there was quite a correction. There was overcapacity, and a number of players, as Robert was mentioning, exited the market. They just couldn't make ends meet. And rates had gone down quite a bit. But in November and December of this last year, and especially in January, we saw them rising again. I'm talking about truckload rates now. And not only domestically in Canada, but the US is still a major partner of Canada when it comes to truckload traffic. And the northbound van rates from the United States saw about a 7% increase. But our logistics department, which keeps an eye on the market in truckload, are expecting things to be flat. So right now, and this is just reading into the future, it's a tough read, I'll say, but we expect the pricing to be rising just under 2% or basically flat.
Yeah, that's really good. And Jigger, it looks like my internet has finally stabilized here. Hopefully it'll continue and I'll have stable internet. Can I just jump in, if you guys don't mind. And
Yeah.
Robert, you sort of talked about, you touched on the tariff situation there briefly. If you don't mind just elaborating on the impacts of our current issues with the U.S. right now and the tariffs. How has that affected the trucking transportation sector? And I wouldn't mind getting your perspective, Rob, from a carrier on this as well, please.
Sure. As with all of this area, it's certainly created the uncertainty because it's on, it's off, it's on, it's off. And from a service industry, which transportation, services customers is those customers, we certainly saw in the lead up to the first deadline, I think from what I heard from our members, there was people trying to ensure they got their products shipped before the deadline, and some people who were going. So there was a big rush to get stuff across the border. So that we saw a big impact from what I understand. And there were other guys who just said, I don't know if this is going to happen. I'm just going to wait and see. So that uncertainty has put it. One of the non-tariff issues is around visas, and now the U.S. has put in some English language requirements, which in a large segment of our drivers going cross border is an issue. Not that they necessarily can't speak English properly, but we're not sure how it may be enforced in the U.S. and it could be in an arbitrary and capricious nature, where it goes down and you may have perfect English but with an accent, and if you're from Scotland and they go, I can't understand what you're saying, and put your truck out of service, and that then is a stranded load because trying to get another driver in. So those areas again of uncertainty and capricious nature of enforcement in the U.S. is causing a lot of concern, and we just don't know how that would work. And border enforcement's also has been another issue, both inbound and outbound. The U.S. about trying to the Canadian government, the provincial government's trying to make sure that we are not facilitating in a trucking industry cross-border shipment of dangerous or legal means. And so that's heightened again the inspections and time, and had that impact on the driving industry as well.
Yeah, and Alan, I'll jump in here. Robert outlines for us at the carrier level the importance of the AMTA and they're being our spokespeople for driver safety within the United States, Canadian drivers, and other legislative impacts of this tariff. But us speaking from the carrier level, and we're of a size where we have a pretty good read on how at least the first 4 months of this year went, and chaotic would be a word I'm hearing. But Robert accurately said that we thought the floor was falling out in March because of the impact of these tariffs, but actually we had a very strong April. And probably to Robert's point is there were a lot of goods moving in advance of tariffs or speculation. But we look at it that the upside of this tariff impact on Canadian society, but also on trucking in particular, is shippers have questioned their supply chains and what were long-term practices where it was easier just to keep the status quo. We have some shippers that have already made long-term structural changes to their supply chain by bypassing the U.S. entirely. And when they have volume, they can do that. But some of the common things we've seen on the ground from a carrier perspective is some of our shippers tried to renegotiate the rates to offset some of the tariff impact. Some came to us as carriers and asked us to find solutions for them to avoid this collaboration, to avoid the tariff impacts. And many have talked a lot to their customs brokers and found ways or tactics, trade management tactics, country of origin and valuation, to make sure that their products were being accurately identified. So there have been a number of measures, and in a few circumstances, we've actually had relocation of warehousing from a U.S. point to Canada. But I need to qualify all of that, and to echo Robert's comment, is there's a lot of wait and see right now, and the real test will be in Q3 or Q4 of this year.
Yeah, that's interesting, and Rob, I think that's fairly consistent with what we were seeing from the likes of Gartner as well. I think Gartner did a bit of a study on this earlier this year, and they surveyed a bunch of CPOs, chief procurement officers in the US around, okay, so how are you going to deal with all these tariff actions? And interestingly, 60% of those that they surveyed felt that they would not be passing these inflationary increases to the consumer, but rather look to pass that on and deal with it internally along the value chain, right? Which is, you know, the push on all of the value chain partners along the supply chain around how do you do things with less now, given that there's these tariffs that are being added on the back end. So really interesting there. We do want to encourage everyone to ask questions. If you have questions, please go to the comment section or the Q&A button at the bottom of your Zoom application there, and put your question in. We do have one question from Gerard Fernandez. The question or the comment is, the lifestyle is tough on a driver, sitting for hours, loneliness. What mental and physical health considerations are being done to make the lifestyle more attractive to choose this as a career? So he's really interested to know how long truck drivers live on average. What is being done, if anything, to make it more attractive for women to even come into the sector as well?
Okay, this is a great question. I'll go to the middle one first and going, I don't know if I've seen any data on the, long lifespan of truck drivers in particular. I could look to see if there is any particular data on that. I don't know if I know any of that. I've seen any of that. AMTA is a health and safety association primarily, as well as doing advocacy for industry. Psychosociological concerns are one that we provide some training and help out with our clients in industry to see if we can help support. It is also one of the, I think in the 2 years ago, that was mandated as a health and safety issue that employers have to be aware of in terms of those psychosociological, which would include hours. And to be very, very candid, long haul truck driving is not suited for everybody. And the people who like it are different than the people who don't like it. And there has to be some screening both for employers and for the employees to go, this is not something for me. So that's something that both have to work on and make sure that it is an occupation that suits them. Now, and again, this is one now, as we're talking about, the technological changes may make that long haul career obsolete in the medium term. We're not sure what that'll look like. Now, in terms of, women filling the positions, there are, various industry groups who are trying to access that demographic. It is an untapped potential for the trucking industry. Women truck drivers, they're way underrepresented in terms of just numbers. Some employers focus on it a little more. They move towards, I would say, an industry, as we look at the demographics or even the technology, that short haul may suit, we believe, women truck drivers, that may benefit them. There are people looking at, how their workforces, how their workplaces work. so make it more inviting to female drivers. One of the things that we continue to advocate for that may not be visible to people are rest areas along highways. Females need better washrooms, and currently, the washrooms available to truck drivers are not very good and not very plentiful and not well spaced apart. It is not very good. You can't just pull a truck to any place off the highway to a small town, park your truck, get into a washroom. That would help, I think, also make sure that females are feel more welcomed and have those facilities they need when they're doing their job. And it is something we continue to advocate for as both our Canadian Trucking Alliance and ourselves. And see with Rob. Want to add anything to what I've said?
Yeah. Well, Robert, and for the group, we look to AMTA to provide guidance on not only the advocacy, but also the provision of the right conditions for drivers, both male and female. The only comment I have in addition is in our case, every terminal has a driver's lounge. The retention of drivers, if a driver leaves us, we perform exit interviews to see where there's areas of improvement, why a driver would leave us. And lastly, we ensure that any trip, especially with the onboard computer systems nowadays, is we can see how the trip went. We talk to every driver after each trip through a supervisor to make sure things go well. But one of the goals is to identify what was their feelings of safety, how did the trip go from a safety perspective, and why were they late or on time. So it's quite a what do you call a thorough review of drivers, because there is I don't want to call it a war, but there's a big challenge of who gets to keep the drivers. And one of the things we've ensured is we pay top 10% in the market, where we're making sure pay is there. But to answer the question from attract them as a career, it's a challenge, and the AMTA gives us a lot of guidance on that aspect.
Thanks, Rob, on that. And a comment at the bottom there from Olivia: tremendous content, very timely. So thank you to the two of you for an excellent presentation. And it's really important to note that our relationship with the Canadian Trucking Association and along with all of the provincial association, including the AMTA and across Canada, I think it's really important that we continue to work closely with those organizations to bring the voice of the trucking sector to our members. The trucking transportation sector is a critical one to supply chains, and understanding some of the drivers and things that are affecting that sector, in which I think a lot of the downstream value chain partners can actually influence and shape as well, is so critical. And we'll look to continue to bring that forward into the future. As we start wrapping up this webinar today, maybe I'll turn to the two of you and ask you for maybe one last, parting word. What's a one thing that you want to convey to participants today? And maybe, Robert, we'll start off with yourself from a sectoral perspective, and then we'll have Rob come after from a carrier perspective.
Sure. I will finish off where I started the presentation on Drivers Inc. It is in some respects, an existential threat to the industry. And I speak this not in terms of just, compliant carriers and that. There is human trafficking being sponsored through illegal carriers that's generated tens of millions of dollars for organized crime. And when people support these Driver Inc. ones it is really driving the industry into bad players' hands. And it's to look at those economics and understand some red flags. And if you want to reach out to AMTA to help understand what those red flags might be, please feel free to contact us to help with that.
And maybe Rob, before you start here, I'm just going to comment quickly. It was really interesting because we had Stephen come and that video that everyone watched there, that was Steve delivering a presentation on the Drivers Inc. issue at our fall conference, and that was a big eye opener for our members and the audience, because I don't think uh, the the issue is well known, and oftentimes, yeah, you do get tempted by the lower rates, and recognizing with the forced labor legislation that's in place, it's interesting that we actually have that issue here in Canada, and right in the trucking sector as well. So we'll continue to sort of bring it forward and raise the awareness within the association. Rob, I'll pass it to you for your parting words.
Sure. Thanks, Alan. Yeah, the Drivers Inc. thing, we look to AMTA to speak for the industry on our behalf. But from a carrier level, and forgive me while I put the sales hat on for just a moment, is communication is critical. The ability of customers and shippers to invite their carriers in and share forecasts and volumes early so we can plan ahead. The second is let's use our shared digital tools, whether it's the APIs and dealing with our systems or our online tools, because it improves our efficiency. And we at some point in the future will start to evaluate our customers based on their digital engagement with us. And lastly, on behalf of the other carriers out there, let's look out for our smaller carriers. They buffer us in times of peak periods, and it is healthy to have a wide customer base. So that would be my parting comment.
Oh my goodness. The three comments are, Rob, we can have a whole new webinar just on those comments alone. Thank you so much. And at this point, I want to remind everyone to use the QR code presented on the screen on the right-hand side there. It's really important for us to hear your thoughts, give us your feedback on this webinar, and it's only through this feedback that we seek to continuously improve on the webinars that we make available, and also to seek your input around future topics that you'd like to see as well, coming from our webinars too. That concludes our webinar for today. I want to thank the AMTA, Robert Harper, for your participation and support, and Rob Eskin with Manitoulin. You guys have been a perennial supporter of our association, and we do support and appreciate that support from your organization. So thank you to our two speakers. Jigar, again, a wonderful job of setting all this up and organizing this. And I want to thank all of the attendees in taking the time today to learn more about the trucking sector, and to hopefully take some of that back into your organization, to share that broadly into your organization as well. At this point, I want to wish everyone a great afternoon, and look forward to the email that will be coming out with a link to the recording and also to the presentation as well. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye for now.